Welcome to Inkwell Spoken Presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. I am your host, Reggie Key, and today my esteemed guest is Erin Wiley. Erin, how you doing?
I'm good, Reggie. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Now, you know why you're here, but I got to make sure the good people who are tuning in know why you're here. You are here because you have accomplished a major feat and that you have published your first book of poetry available on Amazon, yes?
Yes, indeed.
I
It's
know a little
called,
something about it because, I kind of, Water and Wine Press Publishing House is another one of the ventures that my wife and I do. And I was more than happy when I heard that she had a high school friend who was considering getting into the book writing and publishing arena, that we could come along and help you. So tell us a little bit about your book, please.
yeah, so it's called Away with Words, The Voice of Silence. And away is spelled with a capital A and a capital W. It's a play on words. It's a way with words and away with words.
Yeah.
And it's what you said, it's a collection of my poetry, but it's also like interspersed with some like commentary and reflections, because it's kind of talking about the unfolding of my journey spiritually, and my poetry as kind of like an engine and a mechanism through which I did that. So
Mhm.
so it's the first time I've like put my stuff on paper in a form to put out to the masses. So it feels very surreal. And working with you and Kiana was a huge part of that. So it's cool to kind of have those old connections, like being
Yeah.
part of the new things that we're all doing. I love how that's the synchronicity of that. So yeah, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I love it too. I'm excited as well for you. Because I know what it's like. My first book was a book of poetry, and it was very cathartic for me to write it, but then even more so to actually make it available to the masses, because in a sense, you're making yourself available and all of your inner workings available to the masses. And whether they choose to accept it or not is always kind of a weird thing. But at the end of the day, it's really about you accepting what
Yep.
and who you are and who you're becoming,
Yep.
despite who
Absolutely.
you may have been, right? So
Yes.
in that, we're going to discuss some things that I believe will come back up, because it's clear that you have a talent for writing. Would you agree to that?
Yes.
Okay. I
Now
know.
now I can say yes.
Good. I know it's kind of weird to self-affirm, but this session is a lot about self-affirmation, because I think that we have been trained to do the exact opposite and let
Yeah.
someone else kind of affirm us. But what happens when the person who tries to affirm us doesn't really see who we really are
Right.
and begins to affirm us in things that are not what we were called to do, that are not a part of our destiny? And so we have to be careful to affirm ourselves and who we are, so that when somebody comes along and tries to say something different, we don't accept it, because we know who we are.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so with that, this is my first question to you, Erin. Erin Wiley, do
That's
you
me.
consider yourself to be a genius? Do you affirm yourself as a genius?
So I'm difficult. So I have to frame genius, because for me, I don't think of genius as like a static noun. I think of genius as a state. So I think you operate in genius or you do not. And I
Okay.
think there are times that I know there are ways in which I operate in genius and ways in which I don't. And the way I think about genius, I kind of borrowed from this coaching group I was in, and they define genius as the ability to take what's in your mind and execute quickly and subconsciously.
Okay. I like that.
So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So when I think of it that way, there are definitely times when I operate in genius and definitely times when I do not operate in genius.
That in and of itself is genius, because because we do have to know that genius doesn't mean that we are just this everything, we consume and can process and understand everything. Genius is as much about knowing where you excel at and where you don't excel at, so that you don't put
Yes.
yourself in situations where you are not at your best. And because you're not at your best, then you're not contributing at the highest level that you can. And it's
Yeah,
a learning and it's a growth process, right? So,
absolutely.
I'm all about how this was given to me in this book that I wrote, which is the name of this title of this workshop, the title of this interview, is that genius is the majority of geniuses that's around us is non-academic, but we've been programmed to think of it as this academic thing. Like, okay, what's your IQ? What was your GPA coming out of high school? What was your GPA coming out of college? And these define genius for us. But, and I'm not trying to take away from that. Those types of definitions are specific to those types of genius. But there's a plethora of other kinds of genius that we typically don't acknowledge. And therefore we end up not knowing our best because we are like, well, I don't fit that mold. So that mold is often, I don't ever remember. You're the first person I think that's given me a definition of genius that you had already received before coming on this interview. Most people don't even really, we're never really explicitly told what genius is. It's kind of like conditioned and programmed in us as we come up in our formative years, which can be a dangerous thing. So that leads to my next question for you, Erin. Like, when you think of the word genius, maybe you probably think of it differently now, but growing up, when you thought of this word genius, who came to mind? Whose name, whose image, whose face came to mind?
Growing up, I'm trying to think. I don't know. It's weird. It's almost like I never really thought about it. Like, I mean, I guess, if there was a definition of who people say is a genius, there's obvious ones like, the super smart people, like, like your Einstein or like Mozart, or, the people that are like, well-known, Shakespeare, like people that were well-known for the thing that they did. But I don't know. It's interesting because genius is not a word that I really used a lot, I don't think, which is probably why, having an actual definition has helped me. Because now I think about it very differently. So who I would identify as a genius now is very different from what I would have thought then. Oh, my 5-year-old. She's genius.
Right before we got on this call, I was like, Erin gonna name her daughter. Like I just do it.
She's genius. Like, I mean, every day watching her, she's constantly operating in this state of, I'm just about to do what's in my mind and it's about to happen right here. I don't know if it's too big. I don't know if it's too small. I'm not thinking about none of that. I'm about to take this little idea and it's about to go. And I mean, she'll do it on the spot. And it's like, man, I need to be doing that. It's completely unafraid, uninhibited, unrestrained, just like, I have the capability to make all of this happen and everybody's going to go along with me, So
or not, right? Even if they don't, I'm good with that.
Yeah, but no, she doesn't even consider that. She's like, this is what we're doing. And it's not until somebody comes back, it's like, oh, you can say no? Huh. Yeah. All right. Okay, let me reframe, so she's absolutely a genius. Absolutely.
And so, that's amazing to me because, I mean, you and my wife go back to high school. And I don't even go back a year, but just working with you in the time that I have, like, it just hit me clear as day. I was like, Erin's gonna say her daughter. And it's cool because you're the first person who's identified their child as genius, right? Most people think of Einstein when they think of this word, which is going to launch us into this whole definition and how it's impossible for you to see yourself as genius if the person who you identify doesn't even look like you. I don't know about you, but I don't think nor you look like Einstein at all.
I'm guessing not.
Right? And so if that's what comes in most people's minds, somebody who we don't even look like, then how can we attribute genius to ourselves if who we associate it to there's no connection at all.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to take away anything from Einstein. He was a physics genius. We're still putting things with the telescopes that we're developing that are thousands upon thousands of times stronger than they were in his day and time. We're looking out into the galaxy and still finding proof of his theories. Like, yep, it holds solid. So that's amazing that his legacy is that. However, we can't go through life trying to assign and define our genius according to Einstein. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I mean, I
Right.
think you have to you have to take a step back from, because it's like Einstein, the concept of Einstein himself has been boxed in by that label, but you have to kind of step back and say, who was he, like, who did he have to be in order to get to those theories?
Yeah.
And that's when you get back to that state. It's like a state of mind that has you so broad that you're not pigeonholing yourself into a certain way of doing things. Like, you've given yourself a broader scape to work with. And that's where the genius comes from, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like allowing yourself the opportunity to operate in genius is where, you know, and that's, I think people get locked into what they see, like the tangible thing, but it's really, no, who was Einstein underneath? Like, what prompted him to become what we got to see, you know?
Yeah.
And that's really where the answer lies.
It is. And, you know, you're saying a lot. Like, it is, I keep having to reframe my next step, because you're saying
Sorry.
a lot. No, it's good. One thing that I've heard you say at least 2 or 3 times is you mentioned this state. And one of my most recent guests talked about flow state. And he was like, it's a place where it's a zone that you get in where,
Yes.
but that flow state doesn't exist everywhere. Again, and one of my early guests was like, hey, look, I got 0s and 9s. He was like, things that I'm not good at, 0. The things that I'm good at, I want to give myself a 10, because then I'll get complacent. I'll give myself a 9 so that I know there's always room for improvement, and I don't lack off and rest on my own laurels. And so it's all about those 0s and 9s. And the beautiful thing about genius, when each of us taps into it, your 0 may be my 9 and vice versa. But when we come together and do a task like we did with this book, now our 9s can match up, and then we can do something collectively that we couldn't do individually.
Right.
And so what I want to also touch on is, I'm gonna get to Einstein in a second, because I always go there, but I want to spend some time to talk about how important it is that you associate genius to your daughter, because clearly your daughter comes from you. And what I've to notice as I've done these interviews one-on-one is that the people who were more prone to say, yeah, I'm a genius, they had people in their lives that they attributed genius to, that they were related to. It was their parent. And like I said, first I said daughter, but clearly you're still related to your daughter. And so in seeing your daughter as genius, but then seeing yourself in her, then yeah, it's easier for you to be like, yeah, I got some of that. Shoot, she comes from me. If she's genius, it got to be in me too. But not how the world has defined it.
Yeah.
And so that's really important. So I appreciate your identification of genius within the family, because it speaks to how much more prone you are to see it in yourself if you can see it in something that you relate to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about Einstein a little bit more, because you said, like, yeah, we got to know, like, what was beneath Einstein's surface. The interesting thing about Einstein, I don't know if you know his story. I don't know his story too well, but I know this. All throughout his life, all throughout his secondary and post-secondary career, he was told that he did not fit in. When he was the kid that literally got a note home that he had to give his parents, and I believe his parents read it out loud in front of him. And I was like, yeah, you might want to make sure Einstein works with his hands, because he's not fitting in here. Until he got a vocation where he worked, because he not too bright. And clearly, the guy who we attribute to Einstein, it wasn't that he wasn't smart. His intellect and the way he thought, his flow state didn't gel well with the flow state of the school and what they were trying to get everybody else to get into. He was like, no, he didn't fit in that.
He didn't fit the mold, right?
Yeah, can you think what we would have been robbed of had he believed and tried to acquiesce to what they were saying he needed to be?
Yeah.
In their school.
Yeah, I mean, it's that messaging and being able to appreciate and acknowledge people for who they are, where they are, and seeing them outside of this lens is just such a big part, especially with young people, like not trying to pigeonhole them or box them in and say, because you don't do this, you're not this. Like, this is the formula. These are the criteria in order for you to be this. And I feel like nowadays, and maybe like as generations change or whatever, I just feel like more and more people are becoming more aware of that and starting to open that up. Like even what you guys do with your kids, like recognizing the capability of young people and seeing that, no, you don't have to go to school before you can learn how to do this. Like you could do this by sitting here watching me do it, and we could do it together. And then you've developed your own craft and your own skill set. And that's something that you can take with you. But you didn't have to get all these credentials and learn all these things and study all these books in order to establish that, you know.
Yeah.
And
So
I
like,
just think that openness.
Wait till you're older. Like, nah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think the openness and the broadening of perspective about individual potential and capability is the game changer, you know, for people on a global scale, but also on the individual scale.
I agree. This is why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
So let me just touch on Einstein for like 2 more instances before we begin to launch specifically into like what defines your genius. When he got into college, and he was in his classes, his professors did not like him.
Right.
They were, he would be looking out of a window while they were talking. And I had a dude like that in my class, one of my engineering classes, where he wouldn't be looking out of a window. This dude would be asleep. And like, dude, and they would call on him and he would wake up like, oh, okay. And then he would just explain what was on the board and go back to sleep. He got it. He just didn't fit. So Einstein would be looking out of the window and they're like, hello, Einstein, like, and they would kick him out. But here's what he was doing. He was visualizing what it would look like to ride a beam of light from the sun to the earth. And in that visualization, but you can't put that on a chalkboard. You can't, all you can put on chalkboard are formulas. He had visions.
Right.
And through those visions, he got the theory of relativity. So they didn't understand his way of thinking, but his way of thinking revolutionized and galvanized the physics realm. And it's still, like I said, having its impact through to today. And
yeah.
So, you know, he did not allow himself to be fit into a box because it would have robbed him of the creativity that was unique to him. And so there's a quote that purportedly comes from him. You gotta let me know if you already heard the quote
okay.
the other video, and just let me know your initial reaction the first time you heard it. Okay. This purportedly comes from Einstein. And I think it's a pretty dope quote because it opens you up. We're already kind of on this path anyway. So you ready for the quote? All right, like to hear it? Here you go.
Here you go.
Right.
Now. Okay.
you got that reference. All right. If you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's
stupid. Yep. I have heard this one.
Okay.
And the first time I heard it, it was just kind of like, duh.
Right.
It sounds so clear and logical. Like almost like, why is this a thing? Like, why are people quoting this? Like, shouldn't this be obvious?
Right.
It's like, right. It's an obvious statement, but it becomes much more impactful when you start applying it in places and you start attaching it to people and circumstances and yourself. And it's like, man, I'm a fish. Like they told me I was a fish, or they acted like I was a fish and I'm not. But, you know, I guess in my life it's interesting because I haven't really had that experience. Like my family dynamic and the people in my village, like that's just not how we roll. Like everybody is an individual and you're loved and accepted and supported in you and how you move. But I did that to myself. I am notorious for doing that to myself.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it works both ways. You can apply it outwardly, but it's just as important to apply it inwardly, because a lot of times, you know, if you're good on people, but not good on yourself, then you got work to do. You know, either way. And I think sometimes people overlook how they treat themselves and how they view themselves. And, you know, so I think it's a great statement and it's a great philosophy and something to hang in front of yourself on a daily basis and just be like, where am I doing this? Who am I doing this to? When am I doing this to myself?
Yeah, I know you said within your village, and the danger, you're right. If you do it to yourself inwardly, that's the thing that needs to be worked out in you. But again, it's like this conditioning, like how most people, when I ask the question, who's a genius, they're like Einstein, right? And it's something that's kind of in the atmosphere that we just pick up along the way. And even this thing that some of us may do where we judge ourselves according to things that we're not even designed to do, that's still something that's in the atmosphere that we've been conditioned and programmed to kind of do to ourselves. And it doesn't come most of the time from within the village. It comes from outside the village. Because people come along to our village and be like, yeah, I don't understand who you are and you don't make sense in my world. So here's how I'm gonna put this label on you to make my world make sense.
Yeah.
And the danger is when we just take the label without even understanding who we are. And so in this quote that becomes a very great metaphor, to me, the thing that's not in the quote is the bear. Like I the bear, he climbs trees, right? Fish
Mm-hmm.
don't climb trees,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
it's obvious, right? Like, isn't it? I know that the world has been crazy for the past 3 years, but I'm telling you, I tell people all the time, if I look outside my window right now and I see a fish in a tree, I know it's time to get off the planet. Like we're done.
Right. Some things are happening, some things
Some
going
things have
down.
gone awry, right? We
Right.
know that fish have been designed to swim and function well in water. That's their element. That's their
Right.
lane. They have
Right.
fins, gills, scales. They're streamlined to function well in water. So who in their right mind will come along? I see so much more in this metaphor. I see the tree as being one of the obstacles for the fish, but I also see, let's assume this fish is able to interact with people. I see like day by day, somebody's coming by and telling this fish, or hour by hour, because a fish out of water ain't gonna last.
Ain't gonna last long, right?
Right. But in a time that is struggling to climb this tree, I just see somebody on the sideline, like, you ain't climbed this tree yet? Climb the tree. Fish climb it. Somebody constantly reinforcing something that it was never fit to do. And for whatever, it's believing this person or this entity or this system that's saying you're supposed to climb this tree. When if somebody were to just pick up this fish and put it in the water, always in my mind, off script, off screen, there's this lake right next to this tree that it keeps beating his head trying to climb. And if somebody tossed it into the water, you would see the genius of that fish come alive, literally.
Yeah. But the challenge then is, and this is where the inner work comes, once you push the fish in the water, if it's been on that tree for a long time and fighting and doing what its thoughts are supposed to do, once that fish gets in the water, it's like, what do I do? Like, even though this is my element, I still feel wrong because everybody told me I was supposed to be climbing trees. And now that I'm here, I'm just supposed to figure it out. And it goes back to what you were talking about with flow, because it's like if the fish gets out of its own head, it will realize, hey, you're already breathing in the water. Like you're already swimming in the water because that's what you're made to do. But it's so caught up in here, like, but this isn't my thing. This isn't what I do. I'm supposed to climb trees, that it can't even like realize that if it just stops for a second, like, oh, I'm already doing it.
Yeah.
Look at that. Then it's flow, because it's like, I don't even have to effort. I just have to be myself in the space that is designed for me. And by doing so, I'm able to just move, to just flow, to just do. But one of my favorite quotes that I've learned at some point along the way is like, what is mine to do? Discovering what is mine to do and just walking in that is like, oh, that makes things so much easier and more peaceful. Serenity and all of the good things that just make your insides go,
right.
Like finding that thing and just going with it. Like,
That reminds me like of this, when we moved down to South Carolina from Illinois, one of the final like meetings that I had with a couple of, different pastors that I was working with in the community. One of them just came up to me and said, hey, look, know this, the need is not the call. And I was like, snap, like it was short, but it was really impactful, because it's like there's a lot of need where you're going to go, but every need is not your call.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. And so, just to be clear, readers and our audience, what we're talking about is bigger than fish. We're talking about you. We're talking about me, right? It's just a metaphor.
Yes.
Right? The fish has to know what its element is, what its pain is, and so do we. We have to figure out, what is it that we were destined, that we were designed to do on this planet? And so the book that I wrote breaks up genius into 3 parts. And those 3 parts help define our lane, our element. First of those 3 parts is passion. I'm gonna go ahead and say the whole equation, and then we'll walk through it. So it's passion, talent, and purpose. You can get into those 3 things. And it's really only 2, because your purpose in life is to find out what your talent is and then use it in your passion. That's the purpose. And it seems easy, but it can be kind of tricky. It's like putting a puzzle together. So let's get into the first element, this passion piece. I'm gonna do the same thing that I did with jeans, and I'm gonna ask you, like, what comes to mind when you hear this word passion?
Passion the first thing that comes to mind is fuel, like fire. Like it's just an image of the thing that fuels you, fires you, burns you up in good ways. Like it's just the thing that sparks for you.
I love that. People in the past have said, yeah, it's the gas in your tank, because once you got that gas, you're good to go. You're gonna go straight. You're either gonna either things with fuel in the tank either go ahead or they go up. It's either a car or a vehicle that goes ahead, or it's a rocket that goes up. And so once you have that in your tank, once you have that behind you, it doesn't matter what's in front of you. It doesn't matter what. Well, you're either going to go around it, through it, over it, under it, whatever. You're going to address that thing head on because you have this passion. It doesn't matter. You know, I mentioned the word system very, very intentionally when we talked about this fish, because the system that this fish was put in to try and help define it is an obstacle that fish has to get around or get through. And it do it without the proper passion. It can't do it without, you know, we said that its element is the water. And so how I define passion specifically as it relates to this book is a little different than most people. Most people tend to begin to attribute love to passion. Like, you know, we tell kids, hey, look, when you grow up, do what you love. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Save love for marriage. When it comes to your career and your life, because you said like passion is that fuel, the thing that burns, right? That language, because of where I'm about to go. Passion actually is about the thing that you hate.
Yes.
Okay? Because imagine if you could talk to this fish before it like died. If you ask this fish, what do you hate? It's gonna be like, I hate this tree. This tree is something that's making me feel literally like a fish out of water, and I can't seem to get around or beyond this thing, and it's traumatizing. So we all have to take a look at our childhood and figure out, or you know, in our formative years at some point in our life, and figure out like what trauma did we experience, because that trauma informs us about what it is that we were put on this planet to fix. And you know, the world is broken. I think you would agree with me, right?
Broken is quite the word I would use, but I know. I think the world is, because when I think of broken, I think of something that doesn't work, like can't work anymore because it's broken. The world, I think, is, what's the word I would use? The world is unfolding. That's the way I feel. I feel like there are things that are not in alignment, but I think kind of to the point of what you're saying about passion, I think as the things that come up that are out of alignment, there are people that will respond to that to bring alignment around. And I think all of those things are actively happening.
Yeah. So let's use that word, alignment. The world is misaligned. Right. And there are systems in place that are causing this misalignment, right? That misalignment impact, there's so much of it that it impacts each of us in a different way. Right. And when that thing impacts us and it makes us feel like, oh, like that didn't make me feel good. And as you begin to try to heal from whatever trauma that you encounter at a young age or whenever in your life, when you begin to get around it, you begin to identify when it's functioning and hurting other people. And you're like, oh, I hate that though. I hate that thing. I know how that feels. And I don't want to see anybody else feel like that. I don't want to see this thing continue to negatively impact people the way I know it impacted me. And what you'll do is you'll begin to reach out and try and help and fix and align the misalignment. Right. So in that definition of what passion is, because it'll fuel you. Whenever you see it operating, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do something about that though. Like what I tell most people is, a lot of people when they encounter their passion, they were like, man, like the thing that they hate, they were like, man, somebody should do something about that. If you keep saying that every time it's operating and you're like, somebody should do something about that, guess who the somebody is?
Right. It's all you, Slim.
It's you. So it's a game-changing type of approach to things, because most of the time we like to complain about stuff that's broken and then we don't try and offer no solutions to how to fix it though. So you don't strike me as that type of person at all, but I do want to know, Erin, what is the thing that you hate?
I think I struggle. I really hate. I don't use the word hate very often. I really
No, I
dislike.
know that hate was more probably a
Yeah, I really it really bothers me for people to feel devalued or not know their worth or not think they have worth. And so like that's one of those things. And I mean it tends to happen for me in small, like subtle ways. Like, you know, I'm at the playground with my kid and there's like one little kid that's just kind of like off playing by themselves. And I'm like, oh, the little kid looks so sad. Like maybe she wants somebody to play with her, you know, and it's just like, you know, not that I'm going to do, I'm not always going to do something about it because, you know, people's kids and stuff, you can't really always do that. Right. But, you know, but if it was like a birthday party and there was like one kid that was like, I don't want to play, like, okay, the kids are playing, I'm gonna go over and be like, well, what do you want to do? You know, like I don't like when people don't feel seen. I think that's the way, like when people feel disregarded, that is definitely like the trigger, like disregarding someone or someone's opinion or someone's thought process. Like it just, it makes me feel all itchy.
itchy. Rub your flesh around with. That was the impetus of my first poem. Like I fit in. I didn't feel like I was valued. I didn't feel like I was seen. It was called As My Shadow Blends Into the Midnight Winds. It was like, I'm like my shadow. I just fade and nobody even remembers, right? So of course, now I look out for people who feel like that. That's like feeling like marginalized. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But because I know what that feels like, I look out for opportunities when like I try and bring people in too. Like, yeah, come on, you belong here. Don't feel like you don't have a place. Like, let me make sure that you feel seen. So I completely get that.
I think mine is interesting because it's almost like the middle ground because where that's a trigger of mine, I also was not really in situations where I wasn't seen. Like it's almost like, I don't know how to describe why it bothers me because I was, like I said, I was very well supported. I was known, was known for things that I did. So it's not like I was overlooked, but it's almost like I always am looking for the people that fall in the middle. It's like, you're not too good and you're not too bad. You're just right in the middle. Like you seem okay. Because when you're the person that everybody thinks is okay, you're easily overlooked because you're not making noise one way or the other. Right. Those are the people that I'm always looking for because it's like, I need you to know that even though like you're doing what you do. Like my other daughter comes to mind with this one because she's a great student. She does her work and she does it matter of fact and she don't make a lot of noise. And it's just like, she doesn't think there's anything exceptional about that because she thinks she's just being herself. And, you know, I've told her teachers, I'm like, she's the kind of student that every school wants, but you're never going to know it unless you happen to interact with her personally because she's not going to make a lot of noise about it, you know? So anyway, that was a sidebar, but yeah.
Some people, when they're in their flow state, they don't realize how special it is. Right. Because it's just like, I'm just doing, I mean, you know, a fish that's in water is gonna be like, I'm not doing nothing special. I'm just in the water. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And you don't realize like how magnificent that is. I just started learning how to swim within the past year. And I'm like, man, I marvel at anybody that swims now. I'm like, man, that is amazing. Because it's a lot that you have to coordinate to get your body trained to sustain that for a set amount of time. But I have an example. I have a story for you. And by the way, I don't want you to think a certain way. Like the reason why I use that word hate is because I do this workshop with kids. Schools and high schoolers. And if you ever want to get a kid to talk, like just ask them that question. Hey, what do you hate? They were like, oh, like so.
I hate this food. I hate this.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, and that goes right into my example. So I was asked to come to an elementary school a couple of years back. And I knew the principal, and she was like, hey, look, I got 10 boys that are, minority students, and they're struggling. She was like, I just need somebody that looks like them to come in and talk to them and just, show them a different outcome, show them some just vibe with them. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. So I just started putting together this workshop about genius. So I came in like, yeah, I got something for these kids. So I came in and I was like, hey, look, you all are geniuses. Did you know that? And they was like, man, dude, get out of here. Like, I think you in the wrong class. They all rejected it. They was like, man, whatever. And I knew that most people reject this title anyways, this label, and I understood why. But their reaction was interesting because they was like, they were offended. One dude was like, don't call me that. Like, so I'm said it sarcastically, like, hey, genius. Like, but that's not how I said it at all. That's how he took it, because he was used to labels that were put on him that didn't positively affirm him.
Right.
What I didn't know was these 10 little boys were all on IEPs, individual education plans, or what you and I would have called special ed back in the day. So all types of negative labels put on them. You have ADHD, you have ADHD, you are emotionally imbalanced, you are disruptive in class. And they got used to that. They got conditioned to seeing them a certain way. So that when somebody else came and said something higher that might hold them accountable to something higher, they were like, don't call me that. No, I don't
Right.
Then they like started roasting one another like instantly in the same breath, and they thought that was hilarious. I was like, okay. So I went to the question that I knew was going to spark them. I was like, okay, cool. You don't see yourself as genius. I was like, why don't y'all tell me what you hate? And they was like, you serious though? I'm like, yeah. Like, okay. And look, Erin, these 10 little boys who didn't get along well with each other most times, they would fight over what to play. They would fight over when to play. They would fight over whose seat was what. They all universally told me the same answer. You already said it. You said it jokingly, but it fit right into this thing. What do you think all 10 of them told me? Universally.
They hated the cafeteria food.
Nah, not the cafeteria, like the bigger system in place that was making them feel marginalized.
They hated school.
They was like, we hate school, Mr. Key, now what? And they just knew that they had wrecked my workshop. They was proud of themselves. They was like, yeah. And the teachers in the background, like, oh my gosh, like, who did we just let in here? Like, why is he letting them say out loud that they hate school? And I was like, I expect you to say you hate school. Like, why wouldn't you? You come into a place every day that makes you feel like you don't belong. I don't care what the politicians are saying, no child left behind. We're leaving children behind in droves, right? And I was like, yeah, I get that you would say you hate school, but I was like, if you listen to what I'm telling you about how the thing that you hate is the thing that you were destined to fix, the thing that you were destined to address, then what each of you just told me, what each of you just confessed is that you're a future educator. And it was like, oh, snap.
Right.
They started backing up. I'm like, no, why are you backing up though? Like, come closer. I was like, let me break this down for you. So I told them, there's 8 different learning styles, but at most schools only teach from 3. Speak one of those 3 learning styles, guess what? You're going to feel like a fish out of water. You're going to feel like nothing makes sense here. I don't get what's being said to me. I feel dumb.
Right.
And I was like, those 3 learning styles are visual. So you got to, absorb information through your eyes. Verbal, you absorb information through your ears and what's being told to you. And then coming from the left brain hemisphere, which focuses on math. That's not your learning style. You can be like, literally everything that you're getting presented is being lost in translation.
Right.
And some of the learning styles that I see that counter those 3 are you're a kinesthetic learner, which means you got to move to process information. In fact, I have a resting theory that a lot of athletes are kinesthetic learners, which is why they excel on the field and on the court, because they process information quickly as they move, and they do it because that's their element, right?
Yeah.
I was like, but if you are a kinesthetic learner in a classroom where every time you get up and you're not using the bathroom, you're told sit down. You're like, oh, okay. Now your learning style is being suppressed. Or what if you're an exploratory or expeditionary learner? That means you got to like touch and feel on stuff to process information, which a lot of our children tend to be that way.
Yeah.
But the minute you go touching on one too many things, hey, keep your hands to yourself. Stop that. Right? Or you're a right brain thinker, which I think Einstein had both. But to visualize riding a sunbeam, you had to be a right brain thinker. You had to be creative.
Yeah.
Everything being processed from the other hemisphere, you're gonna be like, man, I don't like this place. I hate this place.
Yeah.
If you took your learnings, if you knew what your learning style was, and you took that learning style and let it fuel your passion, and instead of running away from this system that you hate, you ran towards it and said, I'm gonna fix it though. Because when your learning style becomes your teaching style, guess what? Now you're plugging in the gaps that disserviced you, but somebody else in the audience who has the same learning style as you, now they're getting it.
Yep.
Now they feel like they belong because somebody is literally speaking their language. And
Yes.
until the school system begins to embrace all these learning styles and maybe change the formation of the school system so that each learning style is represented. Hold on, because my alarm is going off. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Okay.
We will edit that out in post-production. All right.
I figured you would.
Once each teaching style is represented in the school system, that school system that's broken will begin to align.
Yeah.
There's a whole initiative called the Alignment Collaboration for Education that started in Nashville and is starting to spread all around, working with them now in Illinois. And when I say this to teachers, they're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The teachers, once they know what I mean when I'm talking about hate, they were like, yeah, I get it though, because the school system is broken. They don't disagree with me when I say that.
Yeah, most don't.
Yeah, it's revolutionary though. Like that's
Right.
game changing, and it's not just pertinent in the school system. It's pertinent in every system where human beings are involved, because it's always that person that you said that's on middle ground. That's like, yeah, I'm not high functioning, I'm not low functioning. I'm kind of just like etching by, but there's a higher level of functionality once you're allowed to be the person that you are in the system that you've been placed in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's to, it requires personalization and attention to the individual. And that's the flaw with so many of our systems. Yeah. It's meant to function in bulk. And human beings are not bulk, are not a bulk, I don't know what the word is, are not a bulk thing. They're just not.
Yeah, I mean, we know that schools were designed to produce factory workers. Yep. Cookie cutters, factory workers, get in this line and then just, almost, become mechanized and just do this thing. And that's not how the majority of us learn. And so once we identify this thing, we very much this system that's broken that we were meant to address, it almost becomes a David and Goliath type of thing. Because the thing that you hate, the thing that's misaligned is never going to be something small. It's going to be something large. But when you got that fuel in your tank, you won't care how big it is. You will get at it. One thing that Kiana quotes is, she was like, how do you eat an elephant? One piece at a time.
One piece at a time.
Like, yo, I'll eat this. I don't care how big it is. I'm going to keep getting at it until this thing is off my plate. I don't care how long it takes. You will be driven. Yeah. And this is so important to me for people when they're trying to figure out, should they go to college? If they go to college, focus on that and not the money. Like, it's not about, when you lock into that, you'll do this thing with such fervor that you don't care if you get paid, but eventually somebody will see you at this high functioning level and be like, hey man, can you do that over here though? And we'll compensate you for it. That comes as a benefit, as a fringe benefit. But locking into what you were meant to do, what you were destined to do, what you were designed to do, that's the goal.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Right. So where we go next after passion is getting into talent, because, if we stick to this idea of something is broken, if you have something that's broken around the house, I don't know who's the fixer between you and your husband. But if you see something that's like,
no comment.
But you know how this works. If you find something broken around the house, you look at it and you assess it and you figure out, can I do this, or am I going to have to call a specialist in? And if that you can do it, the next thing that you'll look for is the right tools. Right? If I find the right tool, I might be able to fix this. Right?
Yeah.
And so our talent is our tool to fix the thing that's broken in the world, or that's misaligned, to use your language, that is driving our passion.
Yeah.
Remember, I said that's your purpose in life. Figure out, identify what your talent is, and use it as a tool to address the thing that's broken, the thing that's misaligned, that's fueling your passion. When you do that, you unlock your genius.
Yeah.
So we've already, at the onset of this conversation, we identified what your talent was. Your talent, I like to call people like you and I wordsmiths.
Yes.
Did we already talk about this before? I can't remember if
I don't think so. I don't think we articulated it that way, but I think somewhere, you probably saw it, somewhere in the book I said that. Like, I love wordsmithing. Like,
Yep. And so if you look at your talent as this tool, how do you see do you see something that you're already doing that is tapping into this genius, this flow state? Do you see something that could be doing? How do you see these things coming together? Your wordsmithing, addressing the devaluation of people, feeling like they don't belong, systems that are created that cause people to feel like they don't connect or they don't fit.
Yeah. I think yes, I do it in a, it's hard to say in a tangible way. Like the way that I write or the way that I communicate in written form, I think does that automatically. Like and that's kind of when I started like realizing I had to say I had a talent for writing. Like people will respond to my personal emails and be like, I just love to read your emails. And I'm like, okay, like, I'm just thinking this is just me like communicating. Like if I was standing in front of you talking to you, this is how I would speak to you. So I just put it that way on paper, and then I might tweak it if it doesn't, if I need to like make it make sense. And I think there seems to be something about the way that I write that makes people feel like I'm actually trying to get them to understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like I'm not using some stock language. I'm not trying to be overly complicated. I'm not trying to be fancy. I'm literally trying to get them to understand. And I think the way that I write in my personal communications and my professional communications does that. And then I know the tone of my poetry is very much like trying to broaden perspective from an in-between, neutral, non-judgmental kind of place. Like trying to get people to see things differently, but without making them feel bad about not seeing it one way or the other. Yeah, condescension. That's another thing. Oh, I can't stand it. Can't stand it. Yeah. So I think one of the things about the book, like it's the poetry I already had kind of just sitting on a shelf. But when I was pulling together the pieces, I was like, these things all communicate the same thing. Like whatever your experience is, whatever your viewpoint is, whatever your way of showing up in the world is, it's all valid. And you just have to accept that and find what that means for you. Like once you realize that you're validated, now what? Right. Because feeling that validation, like what you did with the students, it's like giving them something intentional that was based on, their experience. It's like, okay, I had this experience. What do I do with it? Like allowing that to, I guess it's like, I feel like I get the chance to plant seeds to people that says, you may not have thought of yourself this way, but if my words can get you to think about yourself this way, then maybe, just maybe, you're on the path to seeing yourself a different way and moving in the direction of what is yours to do. Like,
absolutely. I see two things for you, Erin. One, so what I could not see beyond my first book was that I would produce other books that were non-poetry, like prose. I didn't see that for myself. I see that for you though. But what I see in your prose, I see you addressing children who may be like your older daughter that are just like, I don't think that anything that I'm doing, you know how the really good children's books create a character that you empathize with, but then you begin to identify with, and then you begin to see them tap into their power in a way that, there's no condescension there. You're just telling a story, but it's a story that people can identify with. You've already said that people read your emails and they feel like, man, like you drew me in, and I understood what you were saying, and there wasn't this, a lot of times people tend to write things that are just meant to highlight themselves, and in the course of highlighting themselves, they box other people out. Like you're not going to understand this. I'm functioning at a high level here, but I see you having the ability to write children's books that allow other children to see themselves in these characters and then be empowered by it. The other place that I see you, when I see you like working with HR and developing policy that is inviting instead of policy that makes you feel like, well, I don't belong. Because I mean, a lot of the systems that we talk about, the reason why things are perpetuated the way they are is because of policies that are handed down from HR. And it takes
Right.
some different vision with different understanding to be like, hey, like this needs to be done this way. For
Mm,
that reason. This needs to be done this way so that people understand where they fit in, and that ultimately HR is supposed to watch out for the best interest of the people. But sometimes
right.
that's just two things that I kind of see in pairing, marrying your talent and your passion together.
Mm-hmm.
Seeds, like you say, it's just planting the seed. We'll see
Yeah.
determination takes root or not. But I'm clearly witnessing the start of something, and it's not even the start of it, because you've been designed this way from birth, obviously, but it's just
Mm-hmm.
you're leveling up into this next place, and it's a great place to come in and kind of observe. And I
Yeah.
want to thank you for letting us be a part of the process. I want to thank you for coming on the show, and I want to thank you for giving me a chance, Erin, because it's my uncommon cue to see the genius in you.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been awesome. I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah. So just to formally end, this has been Reggie Key, host of Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. And this has been my genius guest, Erin Wiley. Erin, do you feel a little more comfortable saying that you're a genius now?
Yeah, I could say that.
Okay, you can say that. All right.
I
All
can
right.
say that. I'm a genius.
All right. Then my job here is done.
Well done, sir.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode. Make sure you pick up the book, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny, by my dad, Reggie Legend, available on Amazon and at inkwellspoken.com. Connect with us at inkwellspoken on all social media platforms. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.